everybody. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. If you're new to the show, it's time to ask your questions. If you've got nutritionally related questions, this is time to get them asked and answered. If you've missed Tuesday's show on lysine, our crash course on lysine, the amino acid, we're going to be prioritizing those questions first. So if you've got lysine questions, type those in. And if you missed the show, it's definitely one you're going to want to go back and watch. We talked about lysine's role in preventing viral issues, especially herpes outbreaks. We talked about lysine as it relates to heart disease and atherosclerotic plaquing, especially if you have high levels of lipoprotein A. And so that's information you're definitely going to want to tap into to use to your advantage nutritionally. So if you're new to Dr. Osborne, come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. Sign up there. We'll send you all kinds of free information about overcoming autoimmune disease using diet, lifestyle, and nutrition. And we appreciate your support there. So let's dive into your questions. What are your thoughts that spinach, this is definitely not a lysine question, but you caught me. What are your thoughts that spinach may mimic gluten? Don't have any. I don't think I've never seen anything literature-wise in medical literature, or I've never had any kind of clinical experience where spinach was mimicking gluten. Now, I've seen cases where people would eat out at restaurants and have cross-contamination of spinach, but not any particular proteins in spinach causing a gluten-like reaction. Now, spinach is very high in oxalates, and so some people are affected by oxalates and can have gluten-like or similar gluten reactions when they're exposed aggressively to too many oxalates. And so that's a possibility, but not directly to gluten. You talked about lysine for herpes outbreaks and cold sores. How effective is lysine for other viruses in your experience? Very effective. We use it in our formula, Melinda, called VIRID, V-I-R-I-D. That's why it's in there. That formula is not for cold sores. It is for the support of diminishing the ability for viral particulate or viruses to replicate. So yes, in my experience, very effective for people that are coming down with something. That's why we have if you haven't checked out our immune protocol, we can put a link up to that protocol for you. But that's why VIRID's at the top of the list. It's one of the reasons is the lysine content. Yeah, so is lysine effective for other post-viral such as shingles? Definitely for shingles. Actually, if you can catch it on the front end of shingles development, so that usually manifests shingles before they appear on the skin, can manifest as severe pain, typically in the back and the spine, and sometimes along the abdomen, and even sometimes in the face. But getting in, 3 grams a day of lysine, on that front end sometimes can stop that from occurring altogether. As far as, the long COVID and Epstein-Barr is generally not the reason people get sick. That's a whole nother topic of conversation. Epstein-Barr activation it occurs as a result of someone who's had their immune system overwhelmed. And so generally Epstein-Barr is not the cause of illness. It is a consequence of an overworked immune system, because we all have Epstein-Barr in us. And so anyway, that's a topic. It's a whole nother topic for probably we could talk hours about that. Thoughts on powdered formulas that have vitamin C with lysine per small scoop? I'd say where you got to be careful with that would be the brand, Richard, because a lot of vitamin C powders are nothing more than GMO corn derived vitamin C, which I don't recommend. So it just depends on the brand that you're using. It's amazing how effective lysine is against cold sores. I always wondered if there is more to the story than just it blocking arginine uptake. Do you have any hunches on other mechanisms? Not really. Arginine is a fuel for viruses, and that's the primary mechanism that we're aware of. And I would just be speculating, which I don't really like to do unless I have some other data that could corroborate that. What are your thoughts on lysine and thyroid? Are they related? Not directly. There could be some indirect relationships, but the lysine doesn't really play a role in the biochemistry of TSH or T3 or T4, or of the role of thyroid receptors receiving, thyroid hormone, or of the role of nuclear receptors being activated. So if there was a relationship, it would predominantly be an indirect relationship. Symptoms of lysine deficiency. It's a tough one because there's not like categorically direct major symptoms of lysine deficiency. I mean, we'd see more of the symptoms, Melinda, of like a protein malnourishment. So like lysine deficient protein malnourished diets would contribute to a host of problems, including skin issues, hair loss, but also including lethargy, fatigue, swelling of the abdomen or ascites. And if we're looking at other potential symptoms, it would be like recurring fever blisters, recurring ulcers. And we might also see somebody in their younger years, earlier on, starting to develop early plaquing of their arteries. I like this one. Elizabeth says, I submitted a question 5 to 6 weeks ago regarding cold sores, having at least 1 to 2 times per month for the last couple of years. You recommended lysine, which I started immediately. Thank you. I have not had an outbreak since then. Love it. Thanks for sharing that outcome with our audience, Elizabeth. Hopefully others reading that or hearing that will take action themselves and experience the same benefit that you did. What do you suggest as a daily dose of lysine for continued control of fever blisters? 1,000 milligrams should suffice as a daily without getting you into too much trouble. Is your lysine product indicated for immunocompromised person? It's fine. You're not going to compromise your immune system by taking lysine. We'll just put it like that. So if you're immunocompromised, there's no real contraindication to using lysine as a supplement. That being said, always talk with your doctor, about your unique situation when you're considering high dosing of any kind of nutrient. What happened to your mold infested house? We're waiting a trial right now. We haven't demolished it yet because it's evidence. And we're going to be doing some documentation in our documentary coming up soon. If you guys haven't checked out moldjacked.com, we can put a link up for you there, but highly recommend you check out that site where we'll be posting new stuff every week about mold, including the story of what happened to me and my family and my dog and my house. Can you take lysine and arginine at the same time, or do they cancel each other out? Now, you can take them at the same time. It would be fine. They would compete with each other for absorption. So, but you eat food all the time that has both lysine and arginine in it. So you could also take them separately so that you could maximize the absorption of each one at a time. But there's no contraindication for taking them at the same time either. My monocytes came back high. Should I be worried? Tough question. I mean, monocytes is just one context of, monocytes can indicate a viral or a chronic infection. So are you feeling healthy? Are you feeling okay? Or are you feeling fantastic and this was just a checkup? I would say if you're feeling well and it was a checkup and they came back high, get them checked again in 3 months. It's possible you're fighting off something when you go to your doctor and your body's winning. And sometimes lab ranges are a little off as a result of that. And so it may not be anything at all to worry about. On the other hand, there may be something else going on. So I would probably, go back to your doctor and get it rechecked in a few months and see if it's still elevated. Can lysine help for tachycardia? No, I haven't seen that be something useful in that regard. I mean, if you've got tachycardia, then there are a lot of things that can contribute to tachycardia, but kind of top of the list as far as nutritional support, I would be considering magnesium, possibly CoQ10 and vitamin B1 as well. But then also I would be looking for triggers. Why is that happening? If it's not nutritional deficiency, tachycardia is oftentimes a result of too much caffeine. Oftentimes we see it in women and men who are overdosed with their thyroid medication. There's a lot of doctors that just write thyroid medicine, and they don't care what your test results about your thyroid say. They just say, oh, you're tired, take more. And that definitely can drive up your heart rate. Is lysine vastly different from glycine? I know they aren't the same, but the name is so similar. No, they're very different. They're very different amino acids with very different purposes. Is it also beneficial for cats? I'm not a vet, so don't ask me about pets and expect any kind of like super experienced answer. I can share my own experience. I have dogs, and I do have a barn cat, but never given my barn cat lysine in that regard. So I can't really say. I would say look up some of these natural vets that are online and maybe pose that question to those guys. They probably have more experience in that regard. What are your thoughts on NACET versus NAC for increasing cellular glutathione levels? P.S. Your grain-free changed my life. Awesome. I'm glad, Scott, it was life-changing for you. I would say NAC is just as effective. NAC is extremely effective for elevating glutathione. I know there's some companies out there offering up NACET as an alternative that's better, but they don't have any real data backing that claim up. And I've used NAC for over 20 years and found it to be fantastically fine and helpful and effective. What's the optimal way to test for histamine? Well, you measure it. You measure histamine. You can also measure tryptase, which can sometimes be an indicator. You can also measure something called DAO, diamine oxidase, which is an enzyme that helps the body degrade histamine. You also would want to know about your vitamin B6 levels, because B6 drives some of those enzymes that help you break down and degrade histamine. What's the cause for low levels of lysine besides diet? Diet's the predominant one. In my experience, is generally we'll see people on high grain diets, which are low lysine diets, be deficient. And so that's really the biggest one. I mean, beyond that, I would say causes would be, I would be concerned, potentially in plant-based diet populations. Now, that's not to say you can't get lysine from other from other foods. Like lentils are a good plant-based source of lysine as well. But a lot of plant-based people do it wrong. I would argue many of them follow the diet as the trend, but not necessarily for their health. And so they're eating processed junk food, and that same can be true of other diets. But as a general rule of thumb, high grain based diets or plant-based diets are the predominants that I see. Very tiny white dots on both my outer and inner lips for many years. Do you know what that may be? I would suspect fungus. I would suspect yeast of sorts. I wouldn't suspect herpes. Herpes usually lends toward the formation of a bubble that blisters, not little tiny white spots. That's typically yeast in my experience. Dr. O, can you please tell us how muscle testing can be inaccurate? I have a family member that needs to hear your answer. Yeah. So look, I trained with the main guy who created applied kinesiology years and years ago. It's not to say, I want to say this, those of you, and there's a lot of doctors that use muscle testing, and there's a lot of people that swear by it as it's helped them. And I'm not going to say these things to try to dissuade you from your experience. I'm not trying to gaslight anyone. I'm just telling you why I prefer not using muscle testing. It's too inconsistent. There's too many variables. When you do muscle testing, typically the way that's done is the doctor gives you a vial. Inside that glass vial, there's some substance. And they ask you to hold it, and then they muscle test you. And if your arm goes weak, then their claim is that you are reacting to whatever's in the vial. But I would argue that, are you reacting to the vial itself, which is a silicate sand, or are you reacting to what's in it? Or are you reacting to somebody's perfume in the waiting room at the doctor's office? Are you reacting to the paint in the VOCs in the paint that are coming off the wall or off the carpet or off the furniture? Did the doctor have a shoulder workout that morning, and so his ability to muscle test is somewhat compromised as a result of those muscles being fatigued? I mean, there's just too many variables in muscle testing. And when I trained, I saw one of the world-renowned muscle testers get different results on the same patient within 5 minutes of time. And to me, that's what deterred me from pursuing that long term. I'm a bigger believer in objective testing, where you have what's called reliability, examiner reliability, and repeat verified results. Meaning, if I were to take your blood, put 2 names on it, send it into a lab, I would get the same result back. I wouldn't get a completely different result. Objective testing can offer that, in my opinion, much more than subjective muscle testing. So hopefully that answers your question. What are your thoughts on organic Ezekiel bread occasionally? If you're gluten sensitive, I don't recommend it. Ezekiel bread has gluten in it. It doesn't matter that it's organic. I know there's a big argument out there that, people don't really have gluten sensitivity, that it's actually just, the way the grain is grown and the chemicals that are being used, like the glyphosate, et cetera. And that's a good argument. You can make those claims, and those claims are accurate. However, you cannot dismiss the fact that gluten sensitivity is real and that it exists. The earliest known incidence and recorded case of celiac disease is 2000 BC. So we know that was before the time of glyphosate. That was before the time of hybridization, the way we see it today. So we know that gluten is a real problem. And I think a lot of people are trying to dismiss it because of the chemicals that are being used in processing a lot of our food. But, look, those same chemicals are in more than just grain, more than just gluten-containing grains. Those chemicals are also in other foods that we grow, and you don't see people reacting to that degree of severity to things like spinach that are sprayed, or to things like asparagus that can be sprayed, or potatoes that are sprayed, but you see them reacting wholeheartedly to the gluten family of grains repetitively over and over again. So I think that argument that people are trying to make, that eat, heirloom grains and that are organic because you don't really have a gluten sensitivity, those people are ignorant of the full spectrum of knowledge that they should have. It's not to say they're 100% wrong in terms of those grains being better, but they're not better if you're gluten sensitive. Would lysine help skin eczema? It wouldn't, Chandra, it wouldn't be my first choice. In skin eczema, the first 2 thoughts I would have is that person needs to be dairy-free, grain-free, sugar-free. And if those things aren't working to clear it up, you need to get your micronutrient levels looked at. So zinc and other B vitamin deficiencies can contribute to eczema. Iron deficiency, which is very common in women who have menstrual cycles, is a very common cause of skin eczema as well. So those things would need to be investigated. And then on top of that, we see a lot of cases of persistent skin eczema when people have changed their diet and supplemented. We see those people have mold issues, mold problems. Would lysine help somebody with AS, ankylosing spondylosis or spondylitis? Possibly, depending on whether or not you were deficient in it. Again, it wouldn't be my first choice for a supplement for somebody with AS to say, hey, this will help your pain. What would be my first choice for somebody with AS would for them to follow the book, No Grain, No Pain, follow the diet, the 31-day protocol in the diet, and see how you feel after 31 days. My guess is it will change your whole life beyond your dreams of recovery. I have questions about the dose of lysine. I take 1 teaspoon a day. I've not seen any effects of absorption with essential. I'm not sure I understand that question. So first of all, a teaspoon a day, it depends on what your lysine is. If it's pure free-form lysine, or if there's any kind of filler, 1 teaspoon could vary greatly in terms of the dose. But maybe re-ask your question, because I'm not sure what you're asking. Can having genetic SNPs affect utilization of lysine, particularly MTHFR? No, MTHFR is not going to affect your utilization of lysine. How can people regain health after taking the deadly jab? You got to get with, so if you did that and it made you struggle and it created problems for you, I've seen about 100 cases clinically now of post damage. I was just talking about this in an interview earlier today, where I had a gentleman that I was treating. He had rheumatoid arthritis, and it was caused, it was an immediate reaction after having that stick. So, what did it take for him and many others that I've seen? 100% you have to change your diet. And so in these individuals, I would say generically follow the no grain, no pain diet. You're going to get rid of a lot of inflammatory foods that will prevent your body from healing and repairing, which is what you need post happening. And then there are some other things that I strongly encourage these individuals to do, and that is higher doses of glutathione along with higher doses of N-acetylcysteine. What I typically do in my practice is we put them on about 2,000 milligrams of NAC. We put them on about 1,000 milligrams of glutathione. We also use proteolytic enzymes, and the formulation that I use is called Matrozyme, and we give them 6 capsules of that formula daily as well. But I've not seen a case of injury where they could recover without changing their diet. You absolutely have to change your diet, because you've got to get your food right so that you provide your body with what it needs to heal and repair and expunge those toxins. What can I do for nerve pain after having shingles? One of my favorite ways to deal with that or help people deal with that is vitamin B1, higher doses in the form of benfotiamine. We have a product called Ultra B1 at Gluten-Free Society, which is pure benfotiamine, and then also lipoic acid, alpha lipoic acid, about 800 milligrams a day is what we give, and those two things can be very supportive and helpful in that regard. What causes back acne? Hormones in range, negative autoimmune antibody. I'm gluten-free and dairy-free, off and on. You can't be off and on. That could be the cause of your back acne or your back knee, so to speak. If your diet's not dialed in, diet would be the first thing on the high list of my suspicions for anyone with acne, because your skin manifests the inflammation that you put in your mouth, right? When you put chemical toxins and bad food in your mouth, oftentimes that manifests through your skin, and that's where you have to start. Now, vitamin A deficiency, zinc deficiency could be contributory to acne. One of the main medical treatments for acne is synthetic vitamin A. A lot of people don't realize that, but Accutane, which I don't recommend, it's a very dangerous medication. It has killed people. It's not safe, in my opinion. But naturally, vitamin A can be effective sometimes as a supplement. That being said, I don't recommend high dosing vitamin A without having your levels monitored and measured. So ideally, if you're going to consider those things, you should do what's called an INA, an intracellular nutrition analysis, and get your levels measured to see if that's something that you're missing. But if you're off and on the diet, your back acne is going to be off and on if it's causing it. Okay, I'm a mid-50s female patient of yours, got rid of my inflammation from gluten sensitivity, lost 30 pounds in the process. In reference to lysine and its effects on collagen, could I perhaps expect to see a difference in the loose skin on my face? Can you open that up, because the question's not full? If I increase my lysine, possibly. The answer is yes and no. I would say, as opposed to taking high doses of lysine in that situation, I would probably consider using collagen more specifically than I would lysine for increasing skin elasticity and firmness. Let's see here. Okay. What supplements for natural blood thinners, and where can I find the info and research on the information? Are there lab tests to determine if blood thinners are even required? There's a lot of lab tests. I think the problem with in my experience, the problem with a lot of cardiologists and doctors who are monitoring people for risk of heart attacks and stroke as a result of blood thickness is it's very rare do I see any of them measure markers for blood thickness. So you mentioned INR, which is good. You can do prothrombin time and you can do fibrinogen and D-dimer are good markers to measure for blood viscosity. You can also measure just straight blood viscosity. So there's a number of ways to look at blood and its rheology, its thickness, or its proclivity to clot. And to me, if you're considering blood thinners with your doctor, you should ask him to run those tests and to monitor them. Otherwise, it's just blood thinners. You know, most doctors after a heart attack or stroke are going to put you on something along that line for a minimum of 6 months. Sometimes I've seen doctors tell their patients, no, it's forever. But they're natural things that you can do. Remember, your blood is not thick because you're bad genetics. Your blood generally is thick because you're doing things that cause inflammation. Your food's bad. You're getting exposed to chemicals that can drive up inflammation. You may have deficiencies in things like magnesium. Magnesium deficiency causes increased platelet aggregation and clotting internally. Omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies can increase blood viscosity. Vitamin E deficiency can increase blood viscosity. So there's numerous nutrients that have an impact on, on your blood. But if you're looking for, the top nutrients to support healthy blood, I would say vitamin E, I would say omega-3, I would say magnesium would be at the very top of the list of those things. And then beyond that, I would be looking at individual need. What does a person need? Another good one that it's more of a herbal, but it can thin your blood really well, and that's ginkgo biloba. And then there's an enzyme called nattokinase. We use an enzyme formula called matrozyme, and then there are other enzymes, proteolytic enzymes, that have effects on blood rheology as well. Could lysine be part of a mycotoxin protocol due to exposure? It wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't use lysine in my mold protocol when I'm trying to prioritize, detoxification of mycotoxins. It's just not going to be my top choice. Does that mean you couldn't take it? No, you could. You could take lysine during a protocol. I wouldn't be using lysine for its detoxification benefit, if that makes sense. Suggested dose of lysine for someone with high blood pressure. I would say, 1,000 to 3,000 grams a day is a pretty safe, not grams, I'm sorry, milligrams a day is pretty safe range for anyone, whether you have blood pressure problems or whether you don't. But I would offer up, Christina, if you've got a blood pressure problem, watch my crash course on blood pressure first. There's a whole lot of information you need to understand, in terms of why blood pressure goes up in the first place. And I think that video would be more beneficial to you than just generically supplementing with lysine. Do you recommend colloidal silver? No, I don't generally. If I'm going to use any kind of silver, it's a homeopathic hydrolyzed silver. But it's for very specific reasons, like it can be used on the surface of the skin as a kind of, when you get a cut or a scrape or something, as an antiseptic. But I don't recommend colloidal silver for fungus or yeast or candida. Insulin resistance. Let's see, insulin resistance when low carb and exercise plus other disruptors are out of the way. What do I do? So you're still insulin resistant, and you're on a low carb diet, and you're exercising regularly. You need to look at or have your chromium, your magnesium, your zinc, your vanadium levels all measured. Watch my course on blood sugar, where I get into the nutritional biochemistry of how insulin works and how it helps, what nutrients regulate it. But I would do an INA. Can we put a link up to the INA? I don't know if you can do that on TikTok or Instagram or not. But if you go to those of you on TikTok and Instagram, if you go to glutenfreesociety.org, it's glutenfreesociety.org, At the top, there's a button that says lab. And if you click on that lab button, you'll see intracellular nutrition testing. You can do direct to consumer testing there if you don't have a doctor who's willing to measure it for you. We deal with, so the question is, can you deal with CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME? Yes to both. Both of those conditions highly linked to gluten exposure, highly linked to malnutrition, and highly linked to mold exposure. That we see a lot of that on a frequent basis. Do you know anything about PEMT and amino acids involved? You're going to have to ask that question differently because I don't know what you're referring to. Recurring UTIs and urethral bladder inflammation, what could be the cause? Well, lots of things. Tammy, I would first think if with reoccurring UTIs and bladder inflammation, I would think first and foremost, I would think you're probably consuming too many carbohydrates. When you have high blood sugar, your blood becomes a petri dish for recurring bacterial infections. And I don't know if your doctor's done a UA on you with a culture to determine if you have a bacteria or fungal UTI. Urinary tract infection could be bacterial or fungal, typically one or the other. But if your blood sugar is not controlled, you're going to have recurring issues. This is a very common problem in diabetics. That you remember, many of the bacteria that can infect your urinary tract love sugar, love glucose. So you just basically, your blood becomes a petri dish for them to thrive in. So I would consider that as a potential possibility. So there's nuance to this too, because a lot of people are re-diagnosed with UTIs and they've been given antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic, and the bacteria is just not going away. And sometimes in those types of cases, the issue isn't the bacteria. The issue could be other things that are irritative to the bladder. One of the big things that can irritate the bladder is oxalate, elevated oxalate. So you might consider asking your doctor to perform a 24-hour oxalate test on you. It's a urine test, and measure your oxalate output, because if it's high, oxalates are like little tiny crystals that can cause irritation to your bladder and to your urinary tract. So something worth looking into. Would you take lysine for an acute injury like an ankle sprain or a hurt knee or a labral tear? Possibly, but what I would take more than just pure lysine is I would take a full spectrum amino acid free-form powder. We have something called ultra aminos for that purpose. So like if somebody has a surgery or somebody has, surgery is scheduled trauma, or if you actually have an acute injury or trauma, you want to be as comprehensive as you can be by providing adequate protein and adequate amino acids for the repair mechanism. I'd also take high doses, 5+ grams a day of vitamin C as part of that protocol as well. And if you're not on a really solid multivitamin like Ultra Nutrients, that would definitely be something I would be on, just to give you a broad shotgun spectrum of an array of nutrients to help support the healing process. Why would immunoglobulin be very low or none whatsoever in my blood work? Which one? Which immunoglobulin? You're talking about immunoglobulin A. Well, glutamine deficiency can reduce IgA. Zinc deficiency can reduce IgA production. Chronic infection or chronic exposures to poisons or toxins can lower your IgA over time. Low protein diets can cause low IgA. So there's several things that it could be. One of the hallmarks of low IgA is actually gluten. Some doctors, when they're doing blood work with their patients, they'll find a low IgA, and that's the clue for them to measure for gluten sensitivity, because gluten can cause low IgA. It's a primary driver of low IgA. So you might consider that if you haven't already. Top supplements recommended for detox from toxic black mold exposure. Can lysine help? I wouldn't, lysine wouldn't be my top choice, but for detoxification, as long as you're out of the mold, so that's rule number one, don't try to detox from mold unless you're out of the mold. But several things can be used to support your body's elimination of toxins. And so one would be glutathione, another would be NAC, cysteine, another would be the use of binding agents like charcoal and zeolite and fulvic acid. Those can be very helpful. We also like to use probiotics. There are certain probiotics or bacteria that we know can help to degrade the mold toxins. And so we actually have a product called Biotic Defense with S. boulardii in it that we very frequently use in that type of situation. But those are good starting points. I'm actually getting ready, Susie, to publish a full kind of guide to mold detox for the layman. And so if you go to moldjacked.com, sign up there. We'll have a newsletter. Go ahead and get signed up for it. When that becomes ready, you'll get a copy emailed to you. So then that goes for any of you that are, looking for mold help. Make sure you go to moldjacked.com and sign up there for our newsletter. And we'll be sending out just tremendous amounts of information as we publish new content for you there. It seems that I have polyglandular autoimmune syndrome with celiac disease, Hashimoto's, Addison's, and GAD65 positivity, which triggered the stiff man syndrome and ataxia. Which specialist would follow these conditions? Good question. I can give you the politically correct answer, and then I can give you what I would do. I'll give you the politically correct answer first. If you have celiac disease, you have a GI doctor. If you have Hashimoto's, Addison's, and GAD65, actually Hashimoto's and Addison's, you'd see an endocrinologist. If you have GAD65 and stiff man syndrome with ataxia, well, actually stiff man syndrome, you'd see a rheumatologist, and ataxia, you'd see a neurologist. Do you want 4 to 5 different doctors managing you, all mixing and matching medications in you, but not really listening to how and why you have the condition that you have, and not really investigating for the underlying reason? That's a choice that you get to make. Now, me personally, I wouldn't go see any of those kinds of doctors and find somebody like myself who understands root cause and understands the triggers of autoimmunity, because all those things are autoimmune. That's the common theme. What are the 4 categories of triggers for autoimmune disease? Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies. Those 4 categories need to be measured objectively and applied. And when that happens, you'd be amazed at the outcome. Can histamine issue cause high oxidized LDL? I've never really even correlated that, Andre, so I can't answer that question intelligently for you. I apologize. I don't measure LDL. I think measuring LDL is a total waste of time. I think it puts people on the path to fear. I don't think LDL plays a role in illness. I think LDL is an important molecule that your brain needs to function. And I think that the aggressive war against LDL has been a travesty for the health of hundreds of millions of people globally. How can you lower high cortisol? I tried a cortisol management supplement, but it interrupted my sleep. I think it was the ashwagandha. Yeah, some people have a paradoxical effect to ashwagandha, and it makes them kind of more anxious, Deborah. And it sounds like that's probably what happened to you. Some people find deglycerinized licorice very helpful, just as a free-form supplement. So you might give that a go. But ultimately, you don't take things to lower cortisol, for the long term. You try to determine why the cortisol's high. Why does cortisol go up? Cortisol goes up because of stress. We generally, I like to categorize stress in 3 ways. We have emotional stress, we have physical stress, and we have biochemical stress. Most people have biochemical stress that they don't know they have, like they have food sensitivities or food allergies, environmental toxic exposures, or imbalances in their microbiome, or nutritional deficiencies that are driving their biochemical stress and leading to elevations in cortisol. That's not to say that emotional stress can't also be contributing, and that's not to say that physical stress can't also be contributing. But in my experience, most of the time, when a person is emotionally intelligent, they generally can control their environment in that regard. And when a person is intelligent about their exercise, they can generally control their physical stress. But it's that biochemical a lot of people are missing. So I wouldn't look for reasons or things to lower it per se. I would look for the reasons as to why your body's making more cortisol than what you should be making. Because long term, cortisol is a catabolic steroid that will eat your bones and your muscles and waste you. It will cause your blood pressure and your blood sugar to go up, and it will contribute to the host or array of different problems that are linked to heart attacks, stroke, but also linked to metabolic syndrome and diabetes. So I would get that part figured out. Get your biochemistry and analyzed so that you know what's driving that cortisol to go up. In the meantime, you can try, deglycerinized licorice. You could also try GABA or theanine. We have a product called Ultra Calm that just generally can calm person down and help with that cortisol spiking at night. But you got to figure out the why part. Best supplement for fatty liver, hands down, two of them. Number one would be choline, specifically choline citrate. Number two would be inositol. Both of those nutrients, when deficient, can cause fatty liver. Now, if you've got high triglycerides, I would surmise or speculate that your carbohydrates in your diet are too high. Triglycerides, which are a measure of fat in your bloodstream, generally are elevated as a result of people over-consuming carbohydrate. And so, because your body's really good at taking excess carbs and turning it into triglycerides. So I would look at your carb intake, and I would say if you're eating more than a third of your total calories, in carbs, you probably need to look at getting that lower, and you'll find that your triglycerides will drop accordingly. You also got to look at gluten if you haven't, because gluten is a major contributing factor in fatty liver disease. Obviously alcohol and other things that can contribute to fatty liver problems. It might be helpful for you to watch my masterclass on liver to get just a deeper dive there. What do you use to wipe down your counters and bathroom at home? Typically we just use water and a microfiber cloth. Everybody wants to put all kinds of chemicals all over their counters. The reality is, I'm going to give you an example because it's a really good question. We all have our microbiomes. We think about microbiome as the bacteria that live in our intestine. And you have about 10 times more bacteria in your intestine than you have human cells in your entire body. But your house is a microbiome. It's a microfield. You have multiple types of microorganisms in your home. And if your home is healthy, if you're healthy, then you don't have to have a fear, kind of a germophobic attitude. You don't have to wipe everything down with Clorox or bleach. Good old-fashioned soap, if you want to do some cleaning, glycerin or Castile soap work well because it's not all the chemicals. And some people use, essential oils or vinegar to wipe things down with, which all those things are fine. And if you're cutting like chicken, on your counter and you've got chicken juice going down, yeah, it's good to use an antimicrobial in that kind of a situation. But if you're just talking about the day-to-day, think less about using antibiotic products and wiping everything with antibiotic products, because your house is your microbiome. It's an extension of your microbiome. You live there. And there's a tremendous amount of research on what we call the hygiene hypothesis of autoimmune disease, meaning that autoimmune disease develops also as a result of people destroying the microbes in their environments. So all this hand washing that you see, all these, during the pandemic, everybody had all these damn hand sanitizers, or that alcohol and chemicals that everybody wanted to rub on their hands every 5 minutes because they feared microbes and germs. Like, it's all nonsense. It's all ridiculous. It's not really cleaning anything. And we actually studied this. My wife actually did a research study in her graduate schooling that she used these hand sanitizers in petri dishes to see whether or not they stopped or inhibited microbial growth. And the answer was they didn't do anything. They didn't inhibit any microbial growth. All they really did was destroy the natural oils on the skin and people and dry the skin out and make them more susceptible to infection through permeation through the protective barriers and layers of the skin. So I'm not a big fan of using all these antimicrobials. Now, I know that may make some of you ladies cringe, but be reasonable about it. I mean, that's not to say never use something to clean your counters, but it's also to say don't over clean everything and fear germs. Your house is healthy and you're healthy. It should be an extension of your microbiome, and you don't have to fear the microorganisms living on you and in your domain if your domain is healthy. Since I changed my diet from SAD to healthy, no grain, no pain, even before fully committed, my cold sores have gone bye-bye. I can't remember the last one. I got them all the time before. I love hearing that. And it's a very common side effect of gluten, is to trigger fever blisters and cold sores. It's actually, in our data, we've collected data now for 20 years on people with gluten sensitivity. And one of these days I'll publish this, but it's on the top 5 of symptoms that people report with gluten sensitivity is recurring aphthous ulcers, fever blisters, and what they think are herpes outbreaks, when in reality, they're reacting to gluten and having an outbreak. I like this. Somebody said there are 2 types of viruses affecting cats, and yes, I treated my 10 cats with Lysine. So there's somebody in the audience right there that has some experience with Lysine in their cats. So maybe, I know we had a question about that earlier. Maybe you guys can connect and talk more about that. I am celiac. I took antibiotics for bronchitis. Now I have SIBO. I don't want to. How do you know you have SIBO? So I don't ever, people say I have X, Y, or Z, and I always, if you have SIBO as diagnosed by a breath test, whether it's methane or hydrogen positive, that's formally what SIBO is. If you have the suspicion of SIBO because you have a lot of gas and bloating, that's a different thing. But I would say if you took antibiotics and it caused your gut problems, you might consider, Robert, a high-dose probiotic for a few weeks and see how you feel and do. What we would use, if somebody came to us that way, we'd use something called ultrabiotic defense, and we can put a link of that for that in the feed for you. Best protocol for GERD. So Brian, I would say figure out why you have it. GERD is there are different reasons why people have it. I mean, sometimes it's caused by a bacteria called H. pylori, and your doctor could run a test that helps you rule that out. Sometimes it's just GERD is nothing more than food irritation. And so you have food sensitivities or food allergies that are driving damage to your stomach, leading to reflux. Sometimes it's medications. Many medications erode the mucosal lining of the GI tract, like aspirin and ibuprofen are 2 very common ones. Even steroids erode the mucosal lining. And so if you've been on any of those or have a history of being on any of those for any great length of time, those can all be driving factors. But I would start with, GERD is not, it's not a genetic disorder. GERD is typically the person is doing something or eating something that's causing the damage. And if they can figure out and reverse engineer what that is, the GERD will go away, and there's no protocol needed. Like, you don't need a protocol. Now, there are products that you can take on the market that will soothe your gut. We have one called GI Soothe and another one called GI Shield. And you could certainly try those things, but and they may be helpful. But at the end of the day, figure out why the GERD exists. Again, going back to don't mask it. Engineer it, figure it out. What causes low kidney function? Lots of things. Nanny, go to our YouTube channel when you get a chance. We have a whole library of crash courses. One of them is on kidney function. So if you go to Dr. Osborne on YouTube, you type in crash course kidney, you'll be able to pull that video up. It's probably an hour, hour and a half long. And if you want to know what causes low kidney function, I do a deep dive, because it's not one thing, it's several things. And a lot of them have to do with diet and nutrition. And I think that if you watch that video, you'll find tremendous information that could be life-altering for you. Any thoughts on lysine for an older dog with weak back, legs, trouble squatting? I hate that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're going through that. I know your dogs are our family. It depends, because, one of the best things I've seen work for dogs with weak back, leg muscles is chiropractic care. Getting your dog's back adjusted, especially if you have one of the bigger breeds like a German Shepherd. They're prone to myopathy, or basically weakening, the nerves, that feed the muscles. You can get problems in those dogs. They can also be prone to hip problems. But you might try that. You might also try, depending on how you feed your dog, you might try glucosamine chondroitin. Again, talk with a vet about that, but those can sometimes be game changers for dogs. Sometimes too, even like turmeric, if you can get your dog to eat it, is a very powerful anti-inflammatory, and sometimes can be helpful in those types of situations, in my experience. But yeah, that's a tough one, because if a lot of it just depends on how you feed your dog. I'd say if you're feeding your dog kibble, you probably won't see any of those things work. Kibble is nothing more than glorified cereal for dogs. Even the special veterinarian blends. I mean, it's all garbage food. We feed at our house. We feed all of our dogs raw, and they generally thrive and do extremely well. There's a big push for NAD. Is it necessary or just marketing? Mostly marketing. That's not to say it can't be helpful. NAD is vitamin B3, basically. And there are different kinds of vitamin B3, like nicotinic acid and NAD. But I think a lot of people are pushing it as hype. I don't think, if you have vitamin B3 deficiency and you want to use NAD as a supplemental to help to correct that deficiency, I would say yes. But I wouldn't go buy NAD in the attempt to try to prolong. With high doses of vitamin C, so like 5 grams of C, 3 grams of lysine, and then have your LPA remeasured in a few months and see what your numbers look like. Are we still on?
Yeah, I just blipped for a second. It's back now.
Okay, I think we had an interruption there quickly. Can low stomach acid be the culprit for low lysine or low essential amino acids? And yes, it can be. How to come out of this vicious cycle? Well, you can take betaine hydrochloride as a supplemental to low stomach acid to help support digestion of proteins and amino acids. You can also just take free-form amino acids. They don't have to be digested and broken down. They're already in their lowest common denominator. So when you take those, as opposed to, say, taking a protein powder, Vinod, so I'd encourage you to look at our Ultra Aminos. It's a free-form amino acid powder that you can take that doesn't require stomach acid for its absorption. Will L-lysine help with dermatomyositis? Number one thing that'll help with dermatomyositis is learning what your triggers are. So what are the triggers? Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficits. See a lot of dermatomyositis where there is gluten issue or a food issue, particularly grains. And sometimes we see dermatomyositis where there's mold in the background as well. So, but I would start with diet, Roxanne. Follow No Grain, No Pain for 30 days. It'll change your life. Diet will change your life. I mean, if the takeaway message today is anything, diet can change your life. It could change your life and take you from hopeless to hopeful in a month. I mean, really, it really can. I've heard talks where people have said that if you're in mold, that can prevent absorption of NAC. Now, mold doesn't really prevent absorption of NAC. NAC is an amino acid. Amino acids are free form, and you don't require the stomach acid to absorb them. So I don't know where you're hearing that from, BJ, but it's not really accurate. And the opposite is actually accurate. So like N-acetylcysteine is an amino acid, whereas glutathione is a tripeptide, which if you were taking that, anyway, I think that's an inaccurate. I mean, you can take both, but if you're in mold and you're trying to take NAC or glutathione, good luck. It's not going to help you. You're not going to detox. It's probably going to make you feel worse, not better. So again, number one rule of mold detoxification is get the heck out of the mold. Are lysine supplements any good? I think yes. I mean, I think they can be. I think it depends on the situation, surely. When I eat raw almonds, I get blisters inside my lips. Does it mean I am lysine deficient? Possibly. Is definitely a possibility. A lot of times when people eat high arginine foods and find that they trigger blisters, they are in lysine deficiency state. I take daily supplements, L-arginine, L-citrulline. Should I also take lysine? If you're taking those daily, those 4,000 milligrams is a pretty strong dose. You're probably going to run into lysine issues if you haven't already. It might not be a bad idea for you to balance that out. What's your opinion on why I never seem to see any difference, feel any positive or negative effects with any high quality supplements I've taken over several years? Because supplements don't cure you. Supplements don't heal you. Supplements are supplemental to diet and behavior change. And if I don't know, like I'm not trying to judge you because I don't know you, BJ, but if you haven't changed your diet and you haven't changed your life, don't expect that a passive supplement is going to miraculously heal your problems. Your body, you play an active role in your care. And it's more of an active role than swallowing pills. The active role, there's 6 things that you need to be focused on doing really, really well if you're trying to improve your health. And that is eat real food, go to bed on time and get good sleep, exercise to your tolerability, get sunshine every day, drink clean water, and breathe clean air. And if you're doing those things consistently well, your body will take care of a lot of problems. And then beyond that, then supplements can be just what they're intended to be, which is supplemental of good behavior. Would you consider taking or making a 300 milligram capsule B1? I take 300 milligrams and would prefer to take one. I mean, if I had enough people requesting, I might consider it, Kersey, but I think you're the first person that's ever made that request. Low white blood cells for the last 10 years, 3.6, doc. Why would that be? No other symptoms. I mean, do you have a recording of what they were prior 10 years ago? Or did you just start recording 10 years ago and it's always been low every time you've checked it? Because you may just have lower counts than the average person, and that may be part of who you are. The big things we see cause low white counts would be predominantly B vitamin deficiencies like B12 and folate can definitely do it. And then environmental toxin exposures, just low levels of environmental poisoning can diminish white blood cells over time. So, mold would be an example of that, but there are other environmental toxins that can do it as well. But if you feel relatively healthy, I would kind of think about is it low in the last 10 years, or is it only low in the last 10 years because you've only checked in the last 10 years? I think that context matters. For UTI, I mean, yeah, let me back up. For the other aspect of that, if you haven't seen a hematologist, you may consider doing that, because you might get some different answers there too. What would you recommend? What would your recommendation to start to reverse autism in a 7-year-old? I mean, diet change got to come first, Liz. No grain, no pain diet. Out of the gate, that's what I would start with an autistic kid. We've seen tremendous benefits of that diet in kids with autism and other developmental disorders. But that's where I would start, and then from there, once you kind of master that, you can kind of see how the child is doing, and then from there you can get deeper. You can go deeper. There's plenty of places to go as far as what other types of triggers, what other types of things could be investigated, but start with diet. Would you use bioactive hydrosol in an neti pot for nasal issues from mold? Possibly. I like grapefruit seed extract more for that than I do the hydrosol, but hydrosol can also be helpful. One of my good doctor friends who owns a culture lab has actually found that hydrosolized silver is one of the most effective antimicrobials for sinus infections that he's ever seen. And he does independent testing in his lab. So he's constantly, taking these different microorganisms and subjecting them to different things. But he's found two things really to be super effective. One is silver, and the other is, and that's for bacterial and fungal, by the way. The other is a over-the-counter spray with xylitol in it. So at any rate, you might look into that as well. What if you have mercury filling? Is it important to have it removed? Maybe important to have it removed, Shirley. It's hard to say. Mercury fillings can be stable. The reason dentists use them for so long is because they're very stable and they last a very long time. That being said, once they go bad, you run into risks. So, you can get with a doctor and ask them to measure your mercury. You would need to do what's called a post-provocation urine test to get an accurate assessment of that. And if it's high, I would get the mercury filling removed. Go see a good biological dentist to do that. There's a website, iaomt.org, and that site has a database of biological dentists that you can look. You can look for somebody in your area. Daily amount of lysine recommended to prevent an outbreak, 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. Those are pretty good, kind of just general preventative amounts. And then as far as during an outbreak, I'd go 3, 4, 5,000 milligrams. Play with it. Start with the lower dose. See how that works for you. But that's where I would start, Dina. I found out I'm working in a building sick with mold. I asked my MD for mycotoxin testing, and she has never heard of it. I love my doctor and firmly believe she does everything within her knowledge to help me. This makes me wonder how many, can we open it and expand that? How many are suffering, never looking outside the doctor's limited knowledge? She said she is going to look into this further. Would it be possible that testing isn't done in Canada? I was shocked that this request was unknown to her. Yeah, look, mold literate doctors are rare, super rare, probably more rare than gluten literate doctors. So, I mean, as much as your doctor might be a great family doc that you have had a great relationship and been very helpful for you over the years. If you suspect you're in mold, now's not the time to be the guinea pig for your doctor to learn lessons about mold. Find a mold literate doctor. And that doesn't mean you have to fire your existing doctor. You just don't want the doctor with no experience in the area to look into it for you. Because what are they going to do when the results come back positive? What's their experience base in helping guide you through that and help you navigate through that? They don't have one. And those of you who haven't been through mold, you have no idea. You really don't have a clue as to the complexity and the confusion and the traumatic stress that it can take your family through. It's not a fun thing to deal with. And you want, if you're trying to figure that out, you want somebody with the experience to be on your team. And that's not to say, I mean, all doctors start somewhere and have to get experience from someone. But if you're trying to pick and choose the best one for you, what do you want? Do you want the guy with the least experience, or do you want the guy with the most experience? I think you can answer that question for you. Sorry to hear that. I miss my childhood when I was a beautiful kid. If you've got alopecia areata, do we have that? God, we have a great case study on alopecia areata. It's diet change. It's an autoimmune reaction in the skin, usually associated with gluten sensitivity. We've seen cases of alopecia areata regrow full heads of hair by just changing their diet. So, Dax, I would encourage you to look into that. Is ghee okay on the no grain, no pain diet? No, not in the first 6 months. It's not. We recommend all dairy avoidance for that first 6 months because of the gluten cross reactivity that it can have. Okay, I think we're over the time. At any rate, thanks for tuning in. If you have not already connected with me on Gluten-Free Society, I encourage you to go over there and do that. And of course, sign up there. We'll send you a lot of free information on recovery from autoimmunity using diet, lifestyle, modification and nutrition. If you suspect you have a mold problem, come visit me at Mold Jacked and make sure you get on the list there, where we're doing lots of information to help you navigate the complexities of mold and mold-related illness. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you hit that like and share button. The censorship is real. The only way we beat it is with you sharing and distributing the information to those that you care about. So help us, help others by sharing. We'll see you next Tuesday for a crash course and another Dr. Osborne Zone episode. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Take care.